Donc on va commencer comme d'habitude avec la...
By taking refuge, reciting the four limitless thoughts, the four measurables, the short Guru Yoga, and the prayer and praise of Manjushri.
Sangye che don tsoge chona la chancho parado tane chamso je tage jinso gimbe sana ge chola penchi sangye chon par sho sangye che don tsoge chona la chancho parado tane Khelzang Puntso jinso gimbe Sanam ge chola pinchi sangye chompar sho sangye chodon soge chonam la chancho parado tanye gyamzo je tage jinso Gimpe sanam ge chola pinchi sangye chompar sho simshin tamshe dewa tong dewe Gyu tong tenpa jurje dong tong dong ge gyu tong chawa gyu je dong mebe lewa tong pa tong menjala jurje nyere cha tong tong chawe tong nyong chumbo la nempa jurje peden sawe lama Shunpo je tage je wo pe me ten sho la ka chen chenpa gom ne je sun te ku sun to ge ngon do tsara do sa ra chom den de chom pe yon la cha tsa lo kong ge lo de chen ne chen chen nye da nam da sha sa we Jenye tenge sin xie sin jie ning ge to ka le bam se kong ta jie pe chen ra la ma je mun to dong le jie jie do zo gen la po jie da jie yin la do jue yang den song Cho ta cho cho nyo mo ne long le ge cha cho da zhe jie ma zhe mun zhe le dong le nyo guo jin ye zhe 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 de na dan ne da jie sa jue da la san yun dian le zhe ge zhe da guo cho cha cho dong cho ne gen zhe Da le mun sa jang ba yang la de jian den juan ji qian la e san ge Da le dian mo mun ba ra xian ne Ka dong den she shun lo do ba ye Lo zhe pa pe na wa za la do so
So now we will continue our study of the second chapter, which is entitled The 22 Faculties, the Governing Faculties, rather. This chapter has 3 parts. We're looking at the first part, the study of the governing faculties. Yesterday and over the previous days, we've looked at an introduction of the 4 fruits of the Noble Ones because we reached the point where we look at how many out of the 22 governing faculties are present in order to obtain the different fruits. We looked at the first part, how many faculties to obtain the first and last fruit. That's what we looked at yesterday. And now we come to the second part, which is how many faculties to obtain the 2 middle fruits. The two middle fruits are fruits number 2 and 3, in other words, a once returner and a non-returner. Vasubandhu shares this information in the 16th stanza, the 4th line. The 3rd line explains the first and the last fruits, and then the 4th line concludes the sentence and says, and the 2 others on the basis of 7, 8, or 9 faculties. That's what we're looking at here. The 2 other fruits, in other words, a once returner and a non-returner. We'll begin with a once returner. This fruit is obtained based on 7, 8, or 9 faculties. When it is obtained on the basis of 7 or 8 faculties, not 9, just 7 or 8, this means that this fruit of a once returner is progressive. If it is obtained on the basis of 7 or 8 faculties, this means that it is progressive. If it is obtained based on 9 faculties, then this means it is obtained by bounding. In all of the explanations about progressive fruits and bounding fruits will come in handy here. The teaching here will talk about, someone asked, can we name the 7, 8, or 9 faculties here? Yes, indeed, that's the purpose of this point. We're going to state them. They're explained in terms of why they're a certain number before getting into which ones they are. So we'll begin with the progressive fruit of a once returner. So as we can recall from our studies over the previous days, in order to obtain this fruit once returner, means that one needs to become a noble being. It is the second fruit of the noble ones, therefore one must be a noble being in order to attain it. If we attain it in a progressive way, we turn our thoughts toward the 4 noble truths. We meditate on this, and at a certain point we enter the path of seeing. We accomplish the first 15 moments of the path of seeing, and when we arrive at the 16th moment, this corresponds to the path of meditation. So this part we must surely recall. This is the progressive way of obtaining this fruit. In this case, there are 2 possible choices. When the person who is practicing reaches the 16th moment of the path of seeing, which also corresponds to the path of meditation, at this point a person has 2 potential choices for what comes next. Either they will continue to practice based on a worldly path, or they will continue to practice based on a super worldly path. Either is possible. When we asked why, the answer was, it depends on the character of the person. Both are possible. So now we'll look at each of these possibilities. So this person who has practiced the four truths progressively and reached the 16th moment, if, having reached this 16th moment, having reached the path of meditation, if this person continues to practice, continues their practice on a worldly path and progressively abandons the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, up to the sixth nuance of things to abandon on the path of meditation in relation to the desire realm, if they do this, in other words, if when they reach the 16th moment, they use a worldly path in order to abandon the things that are to be abandoned on the path of meditation, up to the sixth nuance, which corresponds to the moment when one attains the fruit of a non-returner. If the practitioner progresses in this fashion, then they require or employ 7 faculties. And now we find out which they are. These 7 are the group of 5 whose first is confidence. Let's look at the little list here. So these 5: confidence, enthusiastic effort, remembrance, discernment, and meditative absorption. Once more, confidence or trust, enthusiastic effort, remembrance, discernment, meditative absorption. There are 5 here. We've looked at the first, there are 5 here. There are 7 in total in this case. The others are mental faculty and neutral sensation. So these 7 faculties are the ones with which one attains the fruit of a once returner in a progressive fashion based on a worldly path. Once again, this is if we are relying on a worldly path starting from the 16th moment. Now we'll look at the other case. The case where after the 16th moment, having attained the path of meditation, if at this moment the person engages in a superworldly path and they abandon up to the 6th nuance of things which are to be abandoned, then in addition to the 7 that we have just looked at, there will be one additional faculty, which is the faculty knowledge of all. So here it's progressive. This is the progressive fruit. We focus on the 4 noble truths from the beginning of the path. When we reach the path of seeing and we reach the 16th moment, we reach the path of meditation, and at this point we continue the path of meditation with a super worldly path. We continue to focus on the 4 noble truths. And we abandon the nuances of things which are to be abandoned on the path of meditation. And when we abandon the 6th nuance, we attain the fruit of a once returner in a progressive way, and it has been obtained based on a superworldly path. In this case, there are 8 faculties. The group of 5 whose first is confidence, Let's go over them again. Confidence, enthusiastic effort, remembrance, discernment, and meditative absorption. These 5: mental faculty, neutral sensation. So those are the 7 from the preceding example. And in addition to these, we find the faculty knowledge of all, which is a faculty that is dissociated from factors for descent. It is superworldly. So now we get some more explanations. This faculty, knowledge of all, accompanies us throughout the superworldly path. If we take the superworldly path, starting from the 16th moment, if we begin the path of meditation as a noble being, if we use this superworldly path, then this faculty, knowledge of all, accompanies us. We will eliminate the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th nuances. Having abandoned the 6th nuance, we attain the fruit of a once returner. As we have used a superworldly path to do this, we won't have 7 faculties present, but rather 8. I'm just repeating here. The group of 5, neutral sensation, mental faculty, and faculty knowledge of all. Those are the 8. Here, the faculty knowledge of all is what allows for eliminating the 6th nuance. Khelzang Puntso told us that there are many faculties, knowledge of all, that are associated with the path of meditation. Here, the faculty, knowledge of all, that is present is that associated with elimination of the 6th nuance. It is relative to the abandonment of this nuance. That's a supplementary information concerning the faculty knowledge of all. There are many faculties, knowledge of all, but the one that is present here is the one that allows for abandoning the 6th nuance. There is a question concerning the nuances of things to abandon on the path of meditation. In the introduction on the 4 fruits, we talked about 2 paths, the path of seeing and the path of meditation. Associated with these 2 paths, there are things to abandon on the path of seeing and things to abandon on the path of meditation. And the things to abandon on the path of meditation are laid out in terms of different nuances in relation to each of the levels of the 3 realms of existence. In the 3 realms, or concerning the 3 realms, first we find the desire realm, which is considered to be 1 level. The 2nd realm is the form realm, where there are 4 levels, and the 3rd realm is the formless realm, which also has 4 levels. If we add these up, that makes 9 levels altogether. On each level, or for each level, by way of the path of meditation, there are 9 nuances of things to abandon. The 9 nuances of things to abandon in relation to the desire realm 9 nuances of things to abandon for each of the 4 levels of the formless realm, and for each of the 4 levels of the formless realm. Concerning these 9 nuances, they relate to afflictive obscurations. The contents of these 9 nuances will be explained in greater detail, in chapter 5. But in order to reach these 9, we combine the nuances that are strong, medium, and weak. So to get 9, we have strong, 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 medium, strong, weak. Medium, strong, medium, 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 weak. Weak, strong, weak, medium, and weak, weak. So these are the 9 nuances of things to abandon for each of the levels of the realms. And this categorization of 9 nuances is the same for each of the levels. Here, when we talk about eliminating the 6th nuance, we are talking about the 6th nuance of the first level, in other words, that relative to the desire realm. We are already a noble being at this point, and when we abandon this 6th nuance, we attain the 2nd fruit, that of a once returner. So to come back to our explanation, when we attain the state of a once returner, based on 7 or 8 faculties, as we just saw, this is in the case of a fruit that has been attained progressively. In other words, it is not a bounding fruit. Concerning the bounding fruit of a once returner, that's what we'll look at now. When this state is produced by way of 9 faculties, then this is a bounding fruit. That's what this stanza said, and the 2 others on the basis of 7, 8, or 9 faculties. We saw that 7 and 8 were necessarily a progressive fruit. Here, 9 concerns bounding fruit. So we'll go over the process of the bounding fruit of a once returner. At the beginning of the path, we begin with a worldly path. By way of this worldly path, we are capable of eliminating things to be abandoned in relation to the path of meditation. We'll begin with this worldly path and eliminate up to the 6th nuance of things which are to be abandoned by the path of meditation in relation to the desire realm, the first level. At this point, once we have abandoned this 6th nuance, we will turn away from the worldly path and focus on the 4 Noble Truths. We will continue our practice while focusing on the 4 Noble Truths. We will continue our practice all the way up to the path of seeing. We reach the path of seeing. So at this point, we reach the path of seeing. We accomplish the first 15 moments of the path of seeing. And when we have attained the 16th moment, then this is the path of meditation beginning. This is when we become a noble being. As we have eliminated the 6 first nuances by way of worldly meditation, then there is a bounding effect, and we obtain the fruit of a once returner. We bound directly to the 2nd fruit. So here, there are 9 faculties present in this case. These 9 are The group of 5, whose first is confidence. Then 6th is neutral sensation. 7th, mental faculty. 8th, faculty that allows for knowing all that has not been known. We can recall this is the faculty that is related to the path of seeing. Then there's a question, what is this faculty that allows for knowing all that has not been known? The answer is, this is the governing faculty that is among the last 3 out of the 22. These last 3 out of the 22 are called the immaculate faculties. They are not present in samsara. They are dissociated from factors for descent. And this faculty, the faculty that allows for knowing all that has not been known, it is associated with the path of seeing. On the path of seeing, we can know what has not yet been known, in other words, the 4 Noble Truths. The question is, what are the 4 truths? The whole of this treatise covers the 4 truths. Right now we're talking about the 4 truths. We talk about the phenomena of samsara, the phenomena of nirvana. They are explained explicitly in the first 2 chapters and in detail in the following chapters. We're now looking at the general presentation of the 4 Noble Truths. It might seem fairly detailed already, but it becomes even more detailed later and it gets even easier to understand. So here we're looking at the 9 faculties that are present at this point. The 8th one is the faculty that allows for knowing all that has not been known, and the 9th is the faculty knowledge of all, which is the faculty in relation with the path of meditation. These are the 9 faculties that are present when we attain the fruit of a once returner, that is, bounding. So now we have looked at the faculties necessary for the number of faculties necessary to obtain the 2nd fruit. We previously saw those necessary for the 1st and 4th fruits. Now we come to the part that explains the number of faculties that are necessary in order to attain the 3rd fruit. A non-returner. Let's analyze this fruit of a non-returner. It is likewise obtained based on 7, 8, or 9 faculties. We'll see that concerning these 7 faculties, there is only one possibility. Concerning 8 faculties, there are 2 possibilities. And concerning 9 faculties, there is only one possibility. This fruit is twofold. As we saw previously, the 2 intermediate fruits are twofold. They can be either progressive or bounding. We'll begin by looking at the case of a non-returner with a progressive path. And here we get a new notion which will not be defined to change things up a bit. The candidate for these 4 fruits may have 2 types of faculties, either sharp faculties or obtuse faculties. Don't ask me what this is. I have no idea. So either sharp faculties or dull faculties, obtuse faculties. In the progressive case, with dull faculties, a practitioner will turn directly toward the 4 Noble Truths. This is the progressive case. So first they turn towards the 4 Noble Truths. They practice, attain the path of seeing. In other words, they accomplish the first 15 moments, reach the 16th, which corresponds to the beginning of the path of meditation. And at this point, as we saw in the previous fruit, there are 2 possibilities for the practitioner. They can either continue on a worldly path or continue on a superworldly path. And here we'll see 4 different possibilities, possible cases, which correspond to a combination we can find if we combine the 2 types of faculties, dull or sharp, with the 2 types of paths, worldly and superworldly. If we combine these, that makes 4 possible cases. So first we'll look at 2 cases for a practitioner with dull faculties. The first case is when a practitioner has dull faculties and they undertake a worldly path. We're looking at the 3rd fruit in its progressive state. Such a practitioner has already abandoned up to and through the 6th nuance. Then they continue with the following nuances, in other words 7, 8, and 9, meaning that all that is abandoned by the path of meditation in relation to the desire realm at this point, when they have abandoned the 9th nuance in relation to the desire realm on a worldly path of meditation, then they attain the state of a non-returner. In this case, when we consider a practitioner who has undertaken a worldly path, who has dull faculties, at the moment of attaining this 3rd fruit, they possess 7 faculties. Which are the group of 5, whose first is confidence, mental faculty, and neutral sensation. In this case, we find these 7. These 7 will be found in all of the lists of faculties necessary to obtain the 4 fruits. In each case, these 7 are present. So we've covered the second case, a practitioner with dull faculties who engages in a worldly path, and now we'll look at a practitioner with dull faculties who engages in a superworldly path. If they undertake a superworldly path after the 16th moment, and they progressively eliminate the nuances up to nuance 9, due to having employed a superworldly path in this case, they will not have 7 faculties, but rather 8. These 8, the 7 that were also present for worldly path, the group of 5, whose first is confidence, mental faculty, and neutral sensation. And also the 8th, due to having used a superworldly path. Here we have the faculty knowledge of all as well. And here it is clarified that in this case, a person with dull faculties can never have 9 faculties. They can never have 9 faculties following the elimination of the 9th nuance concerning progressive obtaining of this fruit. Those were the 2 cases concerning a practitioner with dull faculties. Now we'll look at the 2 remaining cases with a practitioner who has sharp faculties. In this case, a person with sharp faculties will attain the fruit of a non-returner by way of 8 or 9 faculties, but not 7. So, in terms of our list of the 4 possible cases, we come to the 3rd case, a practitioner with sharp faculties who undertakes a worldly path. The process is the same. They directly turn toward the Four Noble Truths. They obtain the first 15 moments of the path of seeing. They attain the path of meditation and progressively abandon all that is to be abandoned by the path of meditation in relation with the desire realm up until the 9th nuance. But here, due to having sharp faculties, there's a difference in terms of the sensation. Here we go from neutral sensation to pleasant mental sensation. Something that did not occur for someone with dull faculties. We said that there are 8 faculties, so the 7 we find in each of the cases. The group of 5, whose first is confidence, mental faculty, neutral sensation. And here, in addition to this, we find pleasant mental sensation. Based on these 8 faculties, a person with sharp faculties attains the progressive fruit of a non-returner. There remains one case to look at, that of a practitioner with sharp faculties and a supra-worldly path. If, instead of a worldly path, they undertake a supra-worldly path and they progressively reach the 9th nuance, then in this case there are not 8 faculties but rather 9. The 8 previous faculties plus a 9th one. Which is the faculty knowledge of all. The faculty knowledge of all, which is associated with the path of meditation. So we had the 8 previous ones, the group of 5 whose first is confidence, mental faculty, one of the 3 sensations, and then faculty knowledge of all that has not been known, faculty knowledge of all. Okay, so then what comes next is the what? Something in my explanation is a bit odd. Okay, the explanation of a non-returner who is bounding. Yeah, oh, here it is. Okay. So someone with a bounding fruit is someone who has begun abandoning the nuances of things to abandon on the path of meditation as an ordinary being by focusing on the flaws of their own level and the qualities of the level above. They have abandoned the 9 nuances of things to abandon in relation to the desire realm. And after this, they turn toward the 4 noble truths and accomplish the path of seeing. When they attain the 16th moment, attain the path of meditation, then they bound directly to the 3rd fruit, a non-returner. In this case, the attainment of this fruit necessarily occurs based on 9 faculties. The group of 5 whose first is confidence, mental faculty, and in this case, one of 3 sensations. Oh, sorry, I got a little confused earlier and started reading this. The information wasn't very clear. So in this case, with one of 3 sensations, we're definitely looking at the bounding fruit. So in this case, with the bounding fruit, there is one of 3 sensations present. Either neutral sensation, or the well-being sensation, or pleasant mental sensation. So this is an exception to the rule because we said that for each of these cases we find these 7 faculties that are the group of 5 whose first is confidence, then mental faculty, and then neutral sensation. But in this particular case, there can be either neutral sensation or the sensation of well-being or pleasant mental sensation. And then the two remaining faculties are the two immaculate faculties relative to the path of seeing and the path of meditation.
Donc on a la faculté qui permet de connaître tout ce qui n'a pas été connu.
In other words, the faculty that allows for knowing all that has not been known.
C'est ça qui est relatif au chemin de vision.
Which is relative to the path of seeing. And the faculty knowledge of all, which is associated with the path of meditation. And the faculty knowledge, to repeat it, faculty knowledge of all, which is associated with the path of meditation. Let's take a short break. At this point in the explanations, Khelzang Puntso realized that he had really knocked us over the head with a lot of information, because we just concluded this point concerning the faculties for the two intermediate fruits. And so he said, okay, so to relax now, we're going to tell a story. He started with a question. What do you think? Do all arhats have miraculous powers? There are two types of arhats, in fact. Arhats with miraculous powers and arhats without. And then he told us a story that explains how we can wind up being an arhat without miraculous powers. He explained that when the Buddha was about to enter into parinirvana, he conferred the regency to one particular arhat, Mahakashapa. Mahakashapa was married to Badri, Zongmo in Tibetan. And his wife, Zongmo, was to become an arhati later on. Mahakashapa was the son of a king. But Badri had no particular special roots. the king, Mahakashapa's father, would soon die, and thus his son needed to take on the throne, but Mahakashapa had no wish to do so. He also didn't want to get married, which was worrisome for his father. Mahakashapa created a statue of white gold and said that if one could find him a woman as beautiful as the statue, then he would marry her. And the king's subjects searched all over, and one day they arrived in front of Badri's house. And when they saw her, they realized that compared to Badri, the statue was ugly. But Badri also did not wish to marry. But she didn't have a choice. The king ordered her to marry. And so they married, Mahakashapa and Badri. But after 1 year, they still had no children. The king was very disappointed. When the king passed away, Mahakashapa and Badri had to take on the responsibility of the kingdom, but neither wished to reign. So what they did instead was give all of their belongings to the needy, and each went off on their own. On her path, Badri encountered the Buddha's mother-in-law, who had become a fully ordained nun. Badri took the same vows and attained the state of arhathood. But she did not attain miraculous powers and could not fly. We'll see after why it's a bummer for her. And so she went off on her own, became fully ordained nun, and attained the state of arhathood. But not far from there was another king, Ajatasattu. Ajatasattu had killed his own father, Bimbisara, and was experiencing great remorse. Ajatasattu's subjects were quite worried for him. They thought when they saw Badri that perhaps she could make him happy. And so they forced Badri to come with them to Ajatasattu, and Ajatasattu kept her. After a certain time, Badri returned to her community with the nuns, who asked her where she had been. Badri explained that she had been taken away and kept prisoner, essentially, by the king. At this point, she was rejected by the other nuns, and so she wandered. She once again encountered the Buddha's mother-in-law, and she told this whole story. At this point, the Buddha's mother-in-law asked her why she didn't use her miraculous powers to flee. Why did she not fly from there? And at this point, Badri explained that she had no miraculous powers. She couldn't fly. The Buddha's mother-in-law gave instructions in order to acquire them, and thus Badri obtained the ability to fly. So what did she do? She went back to see Ajatasattu, and when he wanted to take her in his arms, she flew off.
c'est à ce moment-là, en fait,
And at this moment, Ajatasattu realized that he had acted very poorly. He experienced remorse and confessed
tout ça pour dire
his poor behavior.
qu'on peut obtenir le fruit d'Arat.
So all of this goes to say that it is possible to attain the state of arhathood, but that one does not necessarily attain miraculous powers. So why is this the case? Well, there are two types of arhats, those with miraculous powers and those without. There are those that dedicate themselves solely to discernment and simply eliminate the veil of afflictive obscurations. And then there are those who dedicate themselves to discernment, but who have also cultivated meditative absorption. And they have likewise dissipated all of the veils relative to meditative absorption. So now the question is, what is meant by the veils of meditative absorption? Khelzang Puntso explained that this concerns acquiring the different types of meditative absorption. The things that are obstacles to obtaining each meditative absorption are veils. We call them obscurations of meditative absorption. At the beginning of the story, Badri was in the first case. She attained the state of arhathood, but did not attain miraculous powers because she had eliminated afflictive obscurations, but not the veils of meditative absorption. Whereas other arhats, such as Madhyayana, who was known for his miraculous powers, had dissipated both of these types of veils, the veil of afflictive obscurations and the veil relative to meditative absorption. And so here it's added that both of these types of arhats obtain the fruit based on 9 faculties. So now there will be a little bit more explanation to clarify why Badri attained the state of arhathood, but nevertheless had not developed miraculous abilities. What was explained was that prior to the first meditative absorption, there is a preparatory stage, and this preparatory stage precedes obtaining the first meditative absorption itself. This preparatory stage can have 2 aspects or go in 2 directions. The first direction is focused on 2 aspects, the qualities of the above level and the flaws of one's own level, or the other direction is that it is focused on the Four Noble Truths. Some individuals will meditate on the 2 aspects, the qualities of the level above and the flaws of one's own level, while others will meditate on the Four Noble Truths. In other words, the first group, those who focus on the 2 aspects, wish to attain the happiness of the higher levels and wish to be free of their own level. In Badri's case,
elle ne voulait pas avoir un étage supérieur.
she did not want to go toward a higher level.
Elle a vu la nature
She
de la
saw
souffrance
the nature
dans le
of suffering in the three realms of samsara.
se libérer. Donc, elle s'est pas
She
engagée
just wanted to liberate herself and therefore did not engage in meditation that would bring her toward a higher level, but
de la souffrance dans les trois
which was nevertheless in samsara.
l'orientation n'est pas du tout la même.
Depending on the
Ce
intention,
qu'elle a contemplé, c'est vraiment
things are quite different. So she contemplated the Four Noble Truths.
Et donc ce stade préparatoire
This preparatory stage of the first meditative absorption is called
Michokpa Mepa.
Michokpa Mepa in Tibetan,
Michokpa Mepa, ce qui signifie
which means
le recueillement pour lequel
the meditative absorption for which nothing is impossible.
en effet, sur la base
Based on this first meditative absorption, or rather this preparatory stage,
le chemin
when we undertake the path of the Four Noble Truths,
d'éliminer
it is possible to eliminate all afflictive obscurations.
tout ce qui est abandonné
All that is to be abandoned in relation to the three realms.
Donc, autrement dit, ce
In
stade
other
préparatoire
words,
au premier recueillement
this preparatory stage of the first meditative absorption has a power or a potential.
sera capable
Based on it,
d'éliminer
one is capable of eliminating
tout ce qui est abandonné
all that is to be abandoned in relation
avec les trois
to the three realms of samsara.
Et bon, Valérie, elle a emprunté le chemin des quatre nobles vérités.
But Badri
Elle a pratiqué
undertook the path of the Four Noble Truths. She practiced, she attained the
et elle a
path of seeing and the path of
le
meditation,
chemin de la méditation.
and she continued
Elle a abandonné
all the way through the path of meditation. She abandoned all of the nuances to be
l'état d'un
abandoned of all the levels in order to attain the state of arhathood.
tous les voiles
She eliminated all of the veils of
sans que ce soit oublié.
afflictive obscurations.
Donc Valérie, elle a fait ça, elle, sur la base du stade préparatoire.
Badri did this based on the preparatory stage of the first meditative absorption.
Le premier recueillement,
She
on en parlait. C'est
had
la
not attained the first meditative absorption in and of itself,
Donc c'est la raison pour laquelle, même si
which
elle
is
a
why,
tous les obstacles
though she had abandoned all the afflictive
voiles
obscurations,
relatifs,
all of the veils of afflictive obscurations, she had not eliminated the veils relative to meditative absorption.
et en fait, si on n'élimine pas les voiles relatifs au recueillement,
But if we don't eliminate the veils relative to meditative absorption, we don't
on
obtain
n'a pas la capacité
the
d'adopter
meditative absorptions, and we will not be able to accomplish miracles, miraculous acts.
Donc, pour atteindre l'état d'ara,
In order to attain the state of arhathood, it's not necessary to develop miraculous powers,
des capacités miraculeuses,
and in order to attain miraculous powers, it's not necessary to attain the state of arhathood.
là, c'était une histoire que vous racontez de plus en plus.
So this is a story that Khelzang Puntso told.
C'est quand on, mais
When we talked about the introduction to the four fruits, in any case, this story gives us further elements or information about the four fruits, particularly the state of arhathood. In other words, if we attain the state of arhathood, we don't necessarily attain miraculous powers. If we wish to attain both the state of arhathood and miraculous powers, then it's necessary to eliminate both veils, the veil of afflictive obscurations and the veil of meditative absorption. So that was the story. We have 15 minutes if you have questions, or we can continue. I have questions about the difference between a miracle and a mystery. A mystery is something that we don't understand. There are many things that we didn't understand several centuries ago that we understand now, and there are many things that we don't understand today that we will understand in the future. So why do we use the term miracle or miraculous here? Is it because we can't understand it? When we talk about miracles here, this refers to manifesting things that are different than what we expect. Flying, manifesting various things. But why wouldn't that be rather a mystery? And there are things in the 18th, 19th century that we didn't understand, that we now understand. And, there are things that seemed miraculous or mysterious, but now we can explain them scientifically. For those who have very elevated levels of consciousness, that these things aren't miracles. The term here, it's a translation, miraculous powers, prodigious abilities, and that can link to, for us, the idea of things that haven't been explained, that might be explained later. But here, that's not the context, it's not the meaning. This just refers to certain capacities that arrive on a worldly path. The explanation of this comes much later, comes in chapter 8, on the meditative absorption. Based on meditative absorption, beings will be able to practice the path. Based on these meditative absorptions, also called samadhi, they will be able to engage upon the path, a worldly path or a superworldly path. And along with these meditative absorptions, there are various capacities that are present. There are some that are present relative to a worldly path, and some that are present relative to the various fruits. There are some that are not accessible for beings of the desire realm, but beings who practice a certain meditative absorption can access them. Here, the notion is not to be able to explain or not explain certain things, simply in relation to certain capacities that are present that the Buddha explained. And in terms of the Abhidharmakosha, the Buddha explained the various meditative absorptions and the capacities that are present relative to these. Or, for example, there is an explanation in chapter 8 of the capacities that are present relative to an arhat and capacities that are present relative to a Buddha. Okay, so I guess I didn't understand your question initially. This reminds me of a story that Jigmé Rinpoché told. There was an empowerment given in the rotunda at the time. The person who gave the empowerment walked between the rows of people, pouring from the vase, and you can picture the size of a vase, and so he walked through the ranks offering the water from the bumpa, and there was a nun following behind, and she was quite surprised. She said, but in fact the vase, the bumpa, never needs to be refilled. And so she shared her surprise with Jigmé Rinpoché and said, how can this be? It's miraculous that it never needs to be refilled. And Jigmé Rinpoché replied to her that, in fact, when we understand the nature of reality, we don't call that a miracle anymore. It simply is what is. And apparently this story was in relation to an empowerment given by Ken Rinpoché. Are the meditative absorptions dhyanas of the meditation of calm abiding? Yes, some of them can be. It's said that there are 4 dhyanas. So once again, are the meditative absorptions that we're talking about here the same thing as the 4 dhyanas of the form realm? In part, yes, there are meditative absorptions relative to the form realm. We find these 4 meditative absorptions, dhyanas of the form realm. But there are a few more, because there are also intermediate levels, and there are also meditative absorptions relative to the formless realm, with meditative absorption relative to each of the 4 spheres of the formless realm. I'm not sure how many there are in total. In the introduction that Khelzang Puntso gave concerning the 4 fruits, there was a mention of the multitude of meditative absorptions that can exist. And in this story concerning Bhaji, the idea behind this was talking about the veils that are to be abandoned, notably the veils relative to meditative absorptions. There are many veils, and thus we can see that there are many meditative absorptions. Is the veil of discernment relative to Laktong, and the veil of meditative absorption relative to Shine? Okay, wait, let me double check your question. The veil of meditative absorption would be related to Shine, and the veil of discernment would be connected to Vipassana Laktong? Yes and no. Some meditative absorptions are associated with factors for descent. Thus, they won't be practiced by someone who is dissociated from factors for descent. A meditative absorption can be either dissociated or associated with factors for descent. A meditative absorption can be practiced by a being who is liberated from samsara. When discernment is present in the mind stream of an arhat, it is dissociated from factors for descent, but all of these different ideas are connected with each other. We can't establish a clear correlation. Notably,
représentés dans le Mahayana.
Shine and Lactong
On en parle aussi.
are primarily relative to the Mahayana. Maybe we talk about them here also,
Des fois, il faut une définition.
but they don't have the same definitions. No, they. The terms are used, but the definitions are different. Not a question, but rather a point of clarification. So there's Shine and Lactong in the foundational vehicle.
Pardon. Donc c'est pas une question, mais c'est une clarification. Une demande de clarification. Donc dans le véhicule fondamental,
In the foundational vehicle, we
il y aurait Chine et Lactong.
find Shine and Lactong,
Ce ne sont pas les mêmes
but the definitions are not the same as Shine and Lactong in the Mahayana. In chapter 6, there are explanations directly on this, on the path, and how beings accomplish the path. I could give a clear answer if I had chapter 6 in mind, but I don't, so it's difficult to answer, to give an answer that's truly appropriate, saying we can reach this conclusion, we can say this or that. I can't say that because I don't have all of the succession of how the path unfolds in chapter 6 in mind. I know that it's explained at this point in the Abhidharmakosha. I'll be patient and wait for chapter 6 then. At the moment of attaining the third fruit, when we talked about the number of necessary faculties, in the case of dull faculties and a superworldly path, it was said 8 faculties at this point. The 7 from the previous case and a faculty knowledge of all. In this case, it was added, in this case, such a person could never have 9 faculties. Just to clarify, that meant they could never have 9 faculties at this point on the path. Yes, indeed. Here, the point that we're focusing on is how many faculties to obtain the fruits. So we're looking at the moment when we obtain a fruit and how many faculties are necessary then. Concerning what happens before or after, there can be differences, but in terms of how we obtain the fruit, in these different cases, dull faculties or sharp faculties, progressive or bounding, there are 7, 8, or 9 faculties. Just to clarify, supraworldly paths include the path of monk and nun, or are there other possibilities? Here, when we talk about a worldly path and a supraworldly path, the supraworldly path is when we have reached the 16th moment of the path of seeing and we begin the path of meditation. At this point, a worldly path, the supraworldly path is that we continue here focusing on the 4 noble truths. When we talk about the vows of fully ordained monks and nuns, this is something that will come later in chapter 4, and these are the disciplines of individual liberation. That's the term that's used to name the discipline of fully ordained monks and nuns. They are disciplines of individual liberation. And in this chapter, we also find the disciplines relative to lay people, people out living life, who can also have disciplines. But all of these are disciplines of individual liberation. Here, when we're talking about a worldly path or a super worldly path, the super worldly path is when, as a noble being, we focus on the Four Noble Truths. For example, if I'm focusing on the Four Noble Truths, that's not a super worldly path because I haven't accomplished the path of seeing. So I might be focusing on the Four Noble Truths, but we can't talk about a super worldly path. Whereas a worldly path can be practiced by noble beings or by ordinary beings when they focus on the qualities of the level above and the flaws of their own level. They look at what is preventing them from reaching the level above. But you said that noble beings can take a worldly path also? Yes, indeed. They have the choice. Once they have accomplished the path of seeing, they can continue the path of meditation by using a worldly path. In other words, by looking at the flaws of their own level and the qualities of the level above. They remain noble beings, but they can accomplish the various things in this way, all the way up to the state of arhathood. Or they can abandon all of these various nuances by way of a super worldly path. In other words, by focusing solely on the Four Noble Truths. They have the choice. And the difference is that when they attain the fruits, depending on whether they have practiced a worldly path or a super worldly path, then they will either have or not have the immaculate faculty relative to the path that we are accomplishing. Okay, just to clarify what you just said, even if we're already a noble being and you said that the immaculate faculties aren't acting at the moment of attaining the fruit, even if we're already a noble being. Correct. But here we're talking about the governing faculties present at the moment of attaining the fruit. Yes. The immaculate faculties are present when we practice a super worldly path, when we are focusing on the Four Noble Truths after having attained the path of seeing. But if we practice a worldly path, for example, the fruit of a non-returner that is progressive has already attained the two prior fruits, a stream enter and a once returner, and they can practice a worldly path with dull faculties. In this case, they attain the third fruit of a non-returner with the 7 faculties. The immaculate faculty is not present. They have the group of 5 whose first is confidence, mental faculty, and neutral sensation, but they do not have an immaculate faculty. Is it useful to a practitioner to know where they are among all these steps? And if so, at what point do we know this? I mean, at my level, I have no idea where I am. I don't even know if it's useful to know where I am. Studying these governing faculties leads to talking about the different fruits, the different levels, the different results that practitioners who are liberated from samsara can have. It's an opportunity to focus on the path itself. When we talk about the fruits, we're talking about things to abandon, and we'll look at that progressively throughout our study of the Abhidharmakosha. And the things to abandon are things that are fairly simple, that are part of our daily lives. There's aversion, there's attachment. We find this in the explanation of the afflictive obscurations, which are present so long as we are not liberated from samsara, and so long as we are not completely liberated from samsara as an arhat, they're present in some way. And so here we're talking about the way that beings abandon them. Here we're talking about the system of how we abandon them, and later on we'll talk about what they are. And we'll see that, this is talking about us. I do think we can find some elements to know whether or not we've accomplished certain things. What's said, for example, is that in order to attain the first fruit, the stream enterer, it's necessary to have attained a meditative absorption, at least the preparatory stage of the first meditative absorption. And when we talk about meditative absorption, this is a serious level of meditative stability. If we don't have the ability today to cultivate this type of meditative absorption, then we're far from being able to access this type of fruit. All good? We did good work. We didn't get to the final point of this section, which is the refutation of a debate, but we'll see this in October in our next session of the Chinrezi curriculum. And now we will dedicate together. And then, okay.
Samdeye tamshe zepa ne tone nyebe chanam baje ne kiga naj palam chubai sipe zol tawa tawa sho. Merci à tous. Est-ce que ensemble, pour ceux qui restent et qui ont un petit peu de temps, on pourrait ranger ensemble les tablettes, les coussins et les chaises aussi, tu le trimes ? Tout, les chaises aussi, tout. Merci.